Shelter is one of our most important priorities in a survival situation, especially if you're expecting bad weather. But what you pack in your hiking bag as an emergency shelter or in your bug out bag is going to depend on your preferences, your needs, and the environment that you find yourself in. Today I'm going to compare a hammock and a tarp versus a bivy type shelter. I'm Clarice, you're on the Live Ready channel. So I reckon your first thought was, well, if you're expecting bad weather, you really don't want to be in a bivvy in the first place because you're just going to wash away. But bivvies don't necessarily need to be set up at ground level, nor do they just have to be a bag. You do actually get bivvy type shelters that have a strut or a pole system that elevates part of the ceiling of the bivvy. There's an advantage to that because if it's not right against your skin, you don't actually end up with all of that condensation right against you, which means that you are less likely to lose heat through conduction and less likely to suffer the effects of hypothermia. For that reason, I'm visiting my raised platform here today. I'm going to set the bivvy up on the raised platform here, and I'm going to run the camping hammocks lines just next to that, and we can go to comparing the two. Right, let's get started. I really do need to start with building a ladder for this little spot of mine. Alright, so two shelter systems. This one is a legacy camping hammock, which I'm going to set up as a bivvy. It's very similar because of the way that the fly sheet is made. It's starting to drizzle a bit now. And the other one is a camping hammock and my UNIGEAR tarp. So those are the two that we're going to be working with. I'm actually going to set the tarp up first so that I've got some space to put my gear and stuff underneath, because we do expect some weather to come in. I don't think it's going to be as bad as the forecast said it was, but it is drizzling at the moment. So here we go, let's get to it. Tarp first. So tarps are relatively simple to set up. You can make it complicated if you want to, but the advantage of setting up any type of shelter that has a tarp in the construction of that shelter is that you have a really nice dry space to work underneath. So what you can then do is you create an outdoor space that gives you place to store your gear and to sleep and to work. So really simply, actually, I've got an end of the line bowline, put it around my tree, which I'm going to turn into a running bowline shortly. I'm going to run it to the other side and I'm going to secure it with a trucker's hitch. For my trucker's hitch, I just do a loop and pull that through towards where the working end is. Now I can put my working end through my loop and tension my ridge line, more or less at the right height, with a halter hitch and a safety. There we go, ridge line up. And I'm just going to secure it here with a figure 4 knot, because it means that I can tension it and move it around as I like. And an even hitch over with a little toggle to get it out easily. There we go. On this side too. One of my favorites, actually. Really useful if you're running lines on top of lines. Just something to keep it from tightening so much that you can't undo it. There we go. Some really nice tension in there. And now, just to get my hammock up underneath it. It's starting to rain quite a bit now. And this we can actually open up. and a constrictor slip knot, which is not going to come loose, doesn't matter what you do to it. Right, so I've set the tarp up. I've basically just used on these front lines 2 constrictor slip knots, on the ridge line, figure 4 knots with an event hitch over, and just staked it out at the back. It's usually quite quick work. It's not quite an A-frame shelter. I've left it open at the front so that the camera can see into it. And now just to put the camping hammock underneath it. So the obvious advantage of a camping hammock is that you're off the ground. So you're not in the way of any water that's streaming past you on the ground, and you're also not losing heat through conduction that way. It's also a really comfortable night's sleep. Takes a bit of getting used to, but better than sleeping right on the ground. Whereas with the bivvy, that's going to be a little bit different. So yeah, got the set up really nice. If the weather changes or it comes from the opposite direction, I can obviously close this off, make a nice fire here. Because this camping tarp has a silver lining on the inside, it's also going to reflect my body heat and the heat from the fire back to me. So from an insulation and core body temperature maintenance perspective, this is a really great option actually. I could also lower it to close myself into the tarp even more, but at the moment I don't need to do that. It's not that cold. It's chilly, a little bit drizzly, but it's not that cold. We've still got a bit of sunshine coming through here and there. And yeah, now to set up the bivvy on the platform. Yeah, you'll sit over here. Yes, you'll sit over here. Come on, let's go. To set up the bivvy tent, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the poles and the fly sheet. This is a camping hammock in like totality, but I'm actually not going to use the actual hammock part, just the fly and the poles. If you don't know how to build a raised platform shelter, I did do a video on how I made this one. It only takes a little bit of time because you've actually got to saw all the logs to size. Other than that, it's quick. Actually tying it up and building it is fast. Now, bivvy tents often only have one side that's elevated, and it sort of runs at an angle towards the opposite end. Where your feet usually go is usually quite low to the ground, and it often just has like a little bit of headroom at the top. So they're really quite compact, small shelters. Okay, you've got to climb off here. Good doggy. And to get this up here. Okay, bivvy tent set up. I've now got quite an interesting set of lines running around this campsite, having the 2 shelters up. The bivvy, I had to run guy lines from the ends, and I've basically just used the grommets to tie the actual fly to the platform. I'm going to roll this up shortly, and the actual poles I've just tied to basically the struts of the platform, so that they don't move around, and tensioned it until I was happy with it. Right, so to get up here, it's always an interesting story. Nevertheless, we're up and inside the shelter. Not the most comfortable to lie on though. Kind of feel like I might be sharing it with a whole bunch of scorpions. You also want to come up here. Okay, stand over there. Yeah, good doggy. Okay, so this door does actually fold open, but for whatever reason they made the grommets so wide that it usually doesn't stay. There we go. Door's open. Setting up a bivvy like this on a platform is a little bit more tricky because you don't have the ground in which to stake it out. So you've kind of got to tie everything off that you would otherwise stake out. It's nice that you can decide how high you want to be, because your platform doesn't need to be quite this high. You can literally build a platform maybe 30 centimeters off the ground, which is nice because then you can put some hot rocks in underneath your bed during the night, especially if it's going to be a cold one. But you've also got a lot less room to work underneath. So for example, with the camping hammock and the tarp that I've set up, I've got a lot of outside, more exterior room under which I can work. If I need to sort out gear, if I need to build a fire or cook something on a camping stove, I can do that. Oh, here's the drizzle again. Whereas with this shelter, I only have the small space underneath me in which to work. It's still an exterior space in which I can work, so it does give me some room. And then of course, if I want to, I can make my fire right underneath here. Obviously I won't have like a big fire, but I can capitalize on the heat from that fire throughout the night. So I'm going to have constant heat throughout the night in this shelter. Hey doggy. She's kind of like tentative, like, is it safe to walk on here? So yeah, not a bad shelter. At least it will keep me dry. Of course, because there's so much ventilation from the wind, it's also going to cool me down a lot. So I have to be really careful with this kind of shelter, especially how high you build it off the ground, because of all of the ventilation that you'll get through here. Can insulate it. There's a lot of like debris in the forest around here, so I can just make like a debris bed on here, or whatever sleeping system you've got will also insulate you from the bottom. Hey doggy, what do you think? Right, so to compare the setup for these two shelters, this is a little bit more tricky. Camping hammock and a tarp. The camping hammock itself is really easy to set up. So I mean, that literally takes 30 seconds to a minute. It's just making sure that your tension lines are long enough and at the right length on either side so that your hammock ends up being underneath your tarp. The tarp itself, if you've got a rapid ridgeline system and you've basically already made your end of the line bowline knot on the one side, then it's really quick to set up your ridgeline, really quick to stake out the tarp. It does take a little longer when you have to film these things because you've got to like make it so the camera can see it as well. But yeah, both shelters actually really quick and easy to set up. The advantage of the tarp over the bivy tent is that the tarp has a much larger exterior space for you to work. It's also more modular, so you can set a tarp up in an A-frame shelter, you can set it up in a teepee shelter. I did a video using this particular tarp and comparing it to a tent. I'd set it up as a teepee shelter. A little bit more complicated, but absolutely doable. And whatever your needs are, you can actually just make the tarp work for you. Because the camping hammock has a mosquito mesh, it's also really nice because it keeps out all of the creepy crawlies. So you won't wake up with a scorpion like here. I mean, scorpions, they climb underneath things, they walk all over the place. There's still bark on all of these logs, which is why I say I'm probably going to share this shelter with a whole lot of scorpions, because they like this sort of thing, you know, they like this sort of shelter. And your body heat is going to be very attractive to all of the scorpions and the snakes and everything. So if you have an enclosed kind of shelter, something like the camping hammock or a tent, or if I'd put up the inside of this camping hammock, then I've also got an enclosed space in which I can remain and no mosquitoes, ticks, fleas or scorpions or snakes can get to me there. The other advantage of a hammock is of course that you then have a really nice space to just hang out. Whereas with any other shelter, especially the small enclosed shelters, you don't have space to just hang around a fire and chat. On the note of hanging out at camp, I've opened up a Live Ready Patreon page and a Discord server. The purpose of this is to create a forum where people can connect over comments and queries. I find a lot of people mail me questions that other people in the community have experience on. Every person has valuable input to give, and I think it's cool for us to be able to connect as a community over these things. So if you have comments and questions, consider joining the Live Ready Discord server. The Patreon page gives you access to this. Subscribing as a Patreon also helps me to continue making videos like this because it supports the Live Ready platform. Right, so I've now got two shelters set up. I've got the camping hammock with the tarp, as well as the bivy, basically a bivy tent that I've set up on the raised platform over there. To be honest, if I had to choose one of these to spend the night in, I'd go for the hammock and the tarp. I think it's just going to be a more comfortable night's rest. And I also think that there's a lot of room to work underneath here. I can hang my gear here, Indy can be under the tarp. So if it starts raining again or drizzling again later, then I'm perfectly fine under the tarp. Whereas in the bivy shelter, because it's quite a small enclosed shelter, I've only got a tiny little bit of room underneath here, past all the guy lines. Basically, that just the little bit of room that I've got to work with. And you can actually see like right into the shelter from underneath. Have a look. So that's basically what it looks like from underneath. You can see quite a bit of holes, a lot of ventilation coming in and out of here, but pretty cool camp setup either way. So if you like this video, remember to hit like and subscribe, drop a comment below as well. Let me know what your favorite camping setup is. Don't forget to pack your sense of humor along with your emergency shelter, because you are going to be out of your comfort zone. It gives you an opportunity though to realize what you really need. We don't actually need to accumulate earthly possessions, but we do have some basic needs that have to be met. One of those is a spiritual need as well. So remember to take the time to connect with God while you're out in the wilderness. Well guys, that's it from me on these 2 shelter systems. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, do so now. Also remember to check out the Live Ready Patreon page where I post things in advance. It also gives you access to the Live Ready Discord server where we can hash out any topics that you feel are important before we even post them to the channel. Until the next time, live ready. See me! Jump! Jump! Oh, got a little leg. Yeah, we're stinky. Yeah, we're stinky because we're sweating. Hey, now you've climbed a tree. Now you've climbed a tree. Now you're a tree climbing doggy, yeah. Whoops. Are you okay? Make mama dirty, yes you do.